My in-laws ruined me, and now I'm planning my revenge. Hi everyone, I'm Alex. I'm an engineer who always believed that hard work and honesty were enough to build a decent life. I believed in self-reliance, in solving problems with logic and precision, just like in my road blueprints. But nothing prepared me for the web of manipulation I fell into. It all started innocently enough. I was 28 years old, with a stable job at a road construction firm. It wasn't glamorous, but I liked it. My job was to calculate structures and ensure everything fit together perfectly. My life was completely predictable. On weekends, I would indulge in my hobbies, like building model airplanes or going for a run. One of those days, while I was running, I went into a local cafe where I met Sarah. She was vibrant, with an energy that made you smile effortlessly. She spoke passionately about her dreams of traveling, laughed at my silly jokes, and seemed genuinely interested in my technical world and my, admittedly uninteresting hobbies. "You're so solid, Alex," she would say, with that look that made me feel invincible. But Sarah had a fierce loyalty to her parents, a devotion that I initially admired as a family value. I didn't realize it was a blindfold, one that made her prioritize them above all else, convinced that family unity was sacred, no matter the cost. Soon, she introduced me to her parents, Frank and Helen. Frank was the typical self-made man, tall, with a resonant voice that filled the room, always telling stories about how he built his real estate empire with cunning and vision. From the first time we met, he gave me that pat on the back that made you feel like you were part of the club. But beneath it was a cold, calculating man who measured people by their usefulness. Helen, on the other hand, appeared warm on the surface. She gave hugs that smelled of floral perfume and served homemade dinners that made you feel welcome. But she was demanding, with subtle passive-aggressive comments. Nothing seemed truly serious, like when she would say, "Oh, Alex dear, I'd appreciate it if you could take a look at this," and it would turn into an endless task. At first, they would invite me to their suburban mansion every weekend. We'd have barbecues with premium meats, wines that Frank described as liquid investments, and they'd tell us about their adventures in Italy or France. "You're like the son we never had," Frank would say, giving me a wink, and Helen would add, "Sarah shines with you by her side. Take good care of her." And Sarah, radiant, would whisper, "My parents see how special you are. You fit perfectly into our dynamic." I felt lucky, a guy from a humble background, adopted by Sarah's millionaire family. Everything was going well in our relationship, so we got married a year later in an extravagant wedding they orchestrated. Imported flowers, a venue with a lake view, live music. Frank insisted it had to be a perfect wedding, including things like an open bar all night, saying, "The family deserves the best, right, son?" Helen coordinated everything with precision, but in the end, they handed me all the extra bills for the wedding. Sarah calmed me down. "Love, don't worry. Dad just wants this day to be unforgettable. So let's show our gratitude for everything they've given us." I accepted, going slightly into debt, thinking it was a gesture I had to make as her husband for a bright future. What a mistake. That wedding was the hook, the beginning of my submission. The trap closed when Frank took me to his study, a sanctuary of trophies and finance books. He offered me an aged whiskey, leaned back in his leather armchair, and said, "Alex, my boy, your talent is being wasted on those government blueprints. Real estate is where the gold is. We buy ruins, revive them, and sell them for fortunes. Be my 50-50 partner. Imagine the freedom I'll give you. Plus, now you're my son-in-law, so the business will stay in the family." His tone was magnetic, full of promises of wealth and respect. That night, Sarah hugged me tight. "Honey, I'm so happy. Dad sees the potential in you that no one else has seen. It would be foolish not to take advantage of it. Besides, it's a way to strengthen our bonds." I listened to Sarah and quit my job, excited for the change. But the reality was brutal. Frank gave me a meager initial salary, just $2,500 a month, while forcing me to cover various expenses. My tools, gas, even materials he would forget to reimburse. Our apartment, a favor from him, cost an arm and a leg, and he collected the rent without mercy, threatening to increase it if I complained. so my salary barely lasted until the end of the month. Meanwhile, Helen started calling me to help with small repairs at her house. A leaky faucet at 2 a.m., or repainting a room because the color wasn't inspiring her. Frank had me on construction sites from dawn until dusk, criticizing everything I did. Do better, son. My reputation depends on this. Once, during a storm, I carried bricks alone because he didn't trust those expensive contractors. I'd come home exhausted, and Sarah, instead of comforting me, would say, "Understand, love. Dad's business is successful because he works so hard, and he wants you to follow his example. Besides, it's a good way to win over your in-laws." Soon after, Frank became more voracious. It wasn't just about renovations anymore. He'd send me to negotiate with suppliers, using my time without extra pay, and he'd burden me with debts for shared investments I never saw. Helen, with her feigned sweetness, would ask for constant favors. Installing her new oven, fixing the garden, driving her to the supermarket because her car was in the shop. I was always rewarded with a "Thank you, dear, you're so reliable." If I hesitated, she'd let out a sigh. "I thought you were one of us." Sarah always mediated in their favor. I would see her with new things, though I could rarely afford that luxury. When she spoke, she would say things like, "Look how Mom lights up when you help her. It's your way of showing love for me." Or, "Dad admires your work ethic. Helping him strengthens our marriage." While I worked all day, she would spend her time with her parents. One of the first projects he left entirely in my charge was an old house that I turned into a jewel. The structural designs were mine, crafted to provide stability, and they included modern touches like efficient solar panels. I worked alone, paying helpers out of my own pocket because Frank optimized costs. It sold for a fortune, but what I received from that project was paltry, with the excuse of inflated operating expenses. Frank used the profits for his vacation apartment, boasting, "This is vision, son." Helen asked me to remodel it. "It would be a nice gesture, Alex." Sarah added, "Imagine our vacations there. Your work will make it special for everyone." The following months became a whirlwind of exploitation. First 2, then 3 projects at once while Frank vacationed, sending photos of beaches while I sweated and dealt with unstable roofs that he skimped on reinforcing. On one occasion, I suffered a shoulder injury from a cheap scaffold. Frank just told me, "Learn from it. It makes you resilient." Helen increasingly bombarded me with more tasks. Cleaning her pool, installing Christmas lights in July because she planned in advance. All Sarah did was defend them while I broke my back working. She would say, "Love, Mom values your ingenuity. It's how you contribute to our inner circle." Or, "Dad admires your work ethic. Helping him strengthens our marriage." All while I worked all day, she spent time with her parents. Sarah's pregnancy, which should have been a time of joy, Frank used, "Sign this guarantee for my boat. It's an asset that won't lose value. Think about the child's future." Sarah again advocated for him, "Trust Dad. It's all for our future child." The breaking point was that call from Frank before our long overdue trip. I hadn't traveled with Sarah for years because I always had work, although she constantly traveled with her parents and would send me photos saying how much she missed me. In that call, Frank said, "We have an emergency at a property. Come now." I told him I was sorry, but I couldn't go. It was a trip I had planned for years. Sarah immediately reprimanded me. "How can you ignore Dad? He has always helped us." I tried to explain my position, but I saw it was useless. She wouldn't change. Her devotion was absolute. The following days, Frank and Helen's attitude worsened. Once we returned, everything became unbearable. They would throw hurtful comments at me, for example, that I was ungrateful if I didn't help them with something, or that I had preferred a simple trip over the business that fed my family, that I was a disappointment. And I couldn't take that treatment anymore. In solitude, I planned how to solve everything. First, I befriended an accounting intern and obtained evidence of Frank's tax fraud. Frank, ignorant of all this, put me in charge of a major project, designing his dream house. But I made it with hidden flaws. gradual collapses, subtle electrical problems. As usual, I received almost nothing. When those failures started to appear, they said I was irresponsible and that they wouldn't let it go, that they were going to sue me. So during the trial, with all my evidence, not only did they deny their lawsuit, but I countersued for theft of designs. I exposed the whole situation to a journalist. The scandal erupted, ruining them. Sarah, loyal to the end, defended them. Dad was just doing what was best for us, and you just betrayed him. I don't know how I could have married you. I hate you. Hearing her speak to me like that hurt, but I didn't show it. I saw that her blindness continued. I told her I wanted a divorce. She didn't accept, so it was a long legal process, but again, I won. I got custody of my son and compensation because, throughout our marriage, she not only never worked and spent the little money we had left from my salary, but she also barely paid any attention to our son, being so focused on her parents. Now, I live a free life. I got a new job in green engineering, I take trips with just my son, and a year later, I even met a woman who is completely different from Sarah. A woman who values my effort, helps me, and listens to me. Meanwhile, Sarah and her family couldn't recover from the company's crisis after the lawsuit, and I've heard that they've even put Sarah to work because the family must help each other, and now she will be the one exploited. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and comment with your story.